Well, New York Congressman Peter King is mounting a new defense over some controversial hearings he's holding this week about American Muslims, radical Muslims, and terror attacks. The congressional hearings start this Thursday, and critics say focusing on Muslim extremists is biased. We need to be more broad-based in our approach. But Congressman King believes these are necessary to confront the rising threat of homegrown terror. Here he is on Fox and Friends this morning.
The main goal is to show the extent of radicalization within the Muslim American community, how dangerous that is, how serious that is, and also how it happens and whether or not the Muslim community responds to that, whether or not they cooperate with law enforcement. I will have witnesses there to show that this is a real threat. It's a growing threat. And it's not just me saying this. The Attorney General, Eric Holder, says he can't sleep at night because of the growing amount of radicalization among young Muslim American men. John Napolitano says the threat level is the highest it's been since September 11th because of this growing radicalization. So I have no choice. I'm going ahead with the hearings, and they can yell in Times Square, and they can get all these celebrities out they want attacking me. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give in to political correctness.
Joining me now, Heather Hurlburt, Executive Director of National Security Network, and Frank Gaffney joins me now on the phone as well. He is the founder and president of Center for Security Policy and also host for Secure Freedom Radio. Trying to get his, there we have his picture, but we've been having audio problems. Hopefully we have him. Let me start with you, Heather. So Congressman King says, look, I understand that there are other radical elements in this country, but none rises to the level that is as threatening as radical Islam. Do you have a problem with that?
Thanks, Megyn. It's great to be here. You know, the problem with these hearings is that we're not talking seriously about how to combat the threats we face, that we're not looking at what our leading police chiefs and sheriffs and law enforcement and counterterrorism folks think, that instead we're looking at a few folks who have an extremist set of views that actually goes against what bipartisan counterterrorism experts think is the best way to fight the very real terrorism threat that we do.
Well, but so you get to fighting after you identify and explore the nature of the threat. Why not identify and explore the nature of the threat as Congressman King is doing, Heather?
Well, but why wouldn't you call the folks who actually spend day and night dealing with the threat? You know, like former White House counterterrorism advisor Ron Zarate, who worked in the Bush administration and said he thinks these hearings disaster because they'll drive Muslim Americans further away from law enforcement. Why wouldn't you call...
Do you believe that?
Former police chief William Bratton? I'm very worried about it. I think about, you know, I have a little kid, and I think about if my little kid heard some of the things that Peter King and some of his friends and defenders have been saying about a community that's actually incredibly law-abiding and that has stopped a really large number of terrorism attacks, and that, again, sheriffs and law enforcement officials all across the country say is incredibly helpful and cooperative.
Frank, how about it? Because
no evidence to support what King's saying.
Keith Ellison, he also has come out and said, look, I'm worried this is actually going to play into radical Islam's hands. That this congressman, who's the first Muslim in Congress, has said, this is, we're calling attention to what will be perceived as an American hatred of Muslims, radical Muslims, if you will. Either way, he says it's not good for the terrorism war we're fighting.
So something
No,
that's
if you actually spend... Sorry, Heather.
Sorry.
Yeah, Megyn, this is obviously not the only hearing that Pete King is going to have. The idea that we can't do anything until we do everything is obviously not in the cards. We published a book back in November called Sharia, the Threat to America, which I think very clearly demonstrates Pete King is on the right track in starting what I hope will be a comprehensive set of hearings by looking at what is going on inside the Muslim community worldwide, but particularly here in America. And specifically, I hope what he will address is the role being played by organizations that the Muslim Brotherhood, we're hearing a lot about it in Egypt at the moment and elsewhere in the Middle East, but it's here as well, organizations that the Muslim Brotherhood itself has called our organizations and organizations of our friends. And to the extent, Megyn, that we are, as a law enforcement community, as a national security community, as a homeland security community, as a society generally, relying upon Muslim Brotherhood front organizations like the Council on American Islamic Relations, like the Islamic Society of North America, like the Muslim Students Association, to help us with the problem that these kinds of extremists constitute It's crazy. It's like having the KGB advise us on how to deal with the Soviet communist threat back in the Cold War.
What of that, Heather?
Pete King needs to look into this, and when they find out the truth, I hope that that will be the building block for a much more intensive and comprehensive set of hearings to come.
What do you say to it, Heather? Is that unsupported rhetoric, or is that something we really do need to worry about?
Well, I think the first thing people need to know is that most of the organizations Frank just named up actually were welcome guests at the Bush White House. So the idea that those organizations are somehow fronts for a threat to America, you know, is just a little crazy, frankly. I mean, we do need to worry about
it's not at all
terrorism.
It's crazy that they were.
But we don't need to obscure, you know, we need to worry about the real threat. You know, are we doing enough to make sure that nobody can buy enough fertilizer to blow something up? Are we fixing our visa systems the right way? Are we doing enough to make sure that when someone comes to law enforcement with a threat, it gets to the right place in time? There are lots of very serious oversight questions that Congressman King could be asking.
She wants more of a focus then on the building blocks to potential crimes, Frank, and not so much on, you know, one set of people who may or may not be intent on committing them.
Yeah, look, this is a formula for dealing with a disease, a metastasizing disease symptomatically. And that's clearly the crazy way to do this. As to these groups, she's right that these folks were welcomed into the Bush administration. They have been welcomed as well into this administration. Before that, they were welcomed into the Clinton administration. And the problem is the Department of Justice demonstrated in federal court using the Muslim Brotherhood's own documents that these folks are working for the other side. They're part of the problem. And to hear that, for example, the Director of National Intelligence, very quickly,
Frank.
Megan, say this guy is getting it wrong in part because he's listening to the Muslim Brotherhood.
I got to go. Thank you both for being here. We'll be right back.
Well, thanks for having us.